Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Dear viewers and listeners, Assalamu alaikum. This is the second segment of monologue titled Riba and Interest. In this monologue, the discussion on the subject of riba is further extended in the light of wisdom provided by the glorious Koran. The specific issues addressed in this segment include a comparison between riba and charity, 2. Explanation of the element of presence or absence of riba in a domestic loan transaction, 3. The traits of persons who practice riba in different manner. We begin our discussion by making a comparison between practicing charity and riba in terms of individual consequences of the two acts as ordained in the Quran. Chapter 2, verse 276 of the Quran reads, God has laid his curse on riba and blessed sadaqat or almsgiving with increase. He bears no love for the impious and the sinful. The contextual interpretation of this verse is that God condemns riba in relation to almsgiving. Therefore, anyone who hoards wealth and riches and avoids distributing his wealth for the pleasure of God is practicing riba. The question is, why? The answer lies in the fact that Islamic polity is based on equity and social justice. While God is the ultimate heir of everything present in the universe, and human beings are holding wealth as trustees only. This truth is explained in chapter 3, verse 180 of the Quran in the following words. It is God who will inherit the heavens and the earth. God is well aware of everything you do. So, when a person hoards wealth, it creates socio-economic inequality that may lead to socio-political unrest and turmoil in the society, leading to the collapse of the whole system. Therefore, God commands that almsgiving is obligatory for a true believer, and amassing wealth is the worst type of riba. If we take a critical appraisal of this Quranic injunction, we tend to agree that almsgiving is beneficial for the society as a whole. It provides means of living to the poor, and it also protects the rich persons against revolt of poor segments of the society. History is replete with examples where widening of the gap between the rich and the poor led to bloody revolutions and anarchies. Therefore, God, in His eternal wisdom, has provided a logical comparison between riba, that is excessive and skewed distribution of wealth in this instance, and almsgiving by declaring that God has blessed almsgiving with increase in both the worlds, while He has laid His curse on riba due to its dreadful consequences for mankind. In another beautiful verse of the Quran, riba and charity has been compared to reinforce the blessed nature of charity and condemned status of riba in the sight of God in the following words. Chapter 30, verse 39 of the Quran reads, Whatever you lend out in riba to gain value through other people's wealth will not increase in God's eyes. But whatever you give in charity, in your desire for God's approval, will earn multiple rewards. This verse of the Quran makes a comparison between riba and charity in terms of their consequences. It categorically condemns the practice of getting abnormal gains from others' wealth through riba. If someone lends money to a needy person and makes a provision in the contract for abnormal gain, either in the form of exorbitant interest or a penalty clause, to take away the borrower's wealth by cunning, it is a highly condemnable act in the sight of God. On the other hand, if one gives something in charity to a needy person to please God, this act will bring immeasurable reward for him. Again, the focus of this verse is the avoidance of greed for petty worldly gains. In essence, all wealth and riches held by an individual are a trust in his hands, for it is God who is the ultimate heir to everything in the world. Chapter 19, verse 40 of the Koran reinforces this belief in the following words: "It is God who will inherit the earth and all who are on it." Therefore, if an individual spends his wealth to please God, he will be rewarded manifold. For example, chapter 2, verse 261 of the Quran reads, "He that gives his wealth for the cause of God is like a grain of corn, which brings forth 7 ears, each bearing 100 grains. God gives manifold increase to whom He wills, and God is all sufficient for His creatures' needs, all knower." So the reward for charity may be as large as 700 times or 70,000%. While cheating others to multiply one's personal wealth is an act of greed and curse in God's sight. This verse of the Quran shakes the wisdom of any prudent person who may be indulged in riba out of ignorance about the magnitude of reward for charity. Suppose you give a loan of $100 to a needy person and ask him to pay, say, a double in 5 years' time, assuming no inflation. What you are likely to get is $200, a petty gain of $100 over your principal amount. But if you waive off this loan as charity, you will get spiritual reward equal to $70,000. The spiritual reward will be measured and repaid in terms of purity of faith and not in monetary terms. Therefore, 700 times in this verse implies 700 times better reward than what you spend for God's cause. The higher the size of riba, the greater is the spiritual loss. So the opportunity cost of losing a spiritual reward is astronomically high, and only a stubborn fool will prefer riba over almsgiving or waiving a domestic loan to a needy person. Thus, almsgiving brings fruit to the believers in this world through social and economic justice, which provides a congenial environment for peaceful living and accord between different segments of the society, and also for life in hereafter in the form of spiritual gains. While riba, that is excess and skewed accumulation of wealth in this case, brings discord, poverty, and revolts in the society through socio-economic unrest and wrath of God on the judgment day. Almsgiving may also take the form of spending one's excessive wealth by establishing industries and businesses where poor people may be employed and trained on the basis of individual competencies and skills, and where goods and services are produced at cheaper rates for the poor. In fact, there could be several economic alternatives to mere almsgiving as it is conceived in the conventional manner, to benefit the poor segments of the society at large. The ultimate objective of any ameliorative measure for the weaker segments of the society should be based on the principles of egalitarianism and sustainability. Therefore, it is more prudent and pragmatic that alms should become a recurrent source of income generation for the poor segments of the society, rather than a one-off financial assistance. If alms are spent on education, health, food and lodging of the poor segments of the society in a rational manner, such ameliorative strategy may give birth to a more stable and equitable society for the benefit of all human beings. Since practice of riba in any form is the worst type of sin in the sight of God, therefore Quran condemns it from all perspectives to educate mankind to avoid it under all circumstances. Chapter 2, verse 278 of the Quran reads, "Believers, have fear of God and waive what is still due to you from riba, if your faith be true." It is a general prohibition against all types of riba that is receivable on the part of one party and which can be avoided through a waiver by the person intended to receive its exploitative benefits. Thus, it is incumbent upon all believers to waive off excessive interest that is due on a business loan transaction and abnormal profit that is due in a trading transaction, to stop hoarding wealth, to shun depriving females and other heirs in the inheritance share, to stop extravaganza in personal life, and so on. God warns believers against all types of excesses that the men intend to commit so that they may stop practicing riba forthwith. Riba creates social and economic discord and inequality in the society, leading to anarchy and collapse of the Islamic polity. Therefore, the sooner it is abandoned, the better it would be for every member of the society. Those societies that practice riba in any form are wiped out from the surface of the earth through revolutions and revolts. History is abundant with such examples, and this verse of Quran provides us eternal guidance to avoid socio-political catastrophes in a pragmatic manner. Since practice of riba in any form is a challenge to God's authority, therefore God commands that such sinners must be fought with full force. However, Quran also commands that every settlement should be equitable, so that neither of the parties should suffer any monetary loss. Chapter 2, verse 279 of the Quran reads, "Or war shall be declared against you by God and His apostle. If you repent, you may retain your principal, suffering no loss and causing loss to none." This is in continuation to the earlier verses of the Quran linking riba to all types of exploitative gains. For example, when a creditor advances a personal loan, not a business loan which is to generate additional wealth for the debtor through economic activity, to a needy person, he is entitled to get back his principal amount of loan and no excess over it. Because it is a private loan transaction and the debtor is seeking loan as a social benefit to fulfill his inevitable needs. Now, if the creditor demands any excess over the principal as a compensation, it would tantamount to riba, because he is exploiting the weak position of the debtor against God's will. However, if due to inflation, the purchasing power of principal amount of currency has eroded, the creditor may demand compensation to that extent, in the form of interest or a premium over the principal amount, for example, so that neither he suffers a loss nor the debtor. This is based on the principles of equity to ensure that legitimate interest or welfare of both creditor and the debtor must be looked after. This verse explicitly declares that interest payment on a personal loan transaction to compensate for loss in the purchasing power of principal amount of currency is permissible in Islam, so long as interest plus principal at the time of return of loan are broadly equal to principal amount lent in the past, measured in terms of purchasing power of money. As already explained earlier, A personal loan by a needy person is sought to fulfill his inevitable need. Therefore, keeping in view his precarious financial status, he may be treated more gently. Chapter 2, verse 280 of the Koran reads, "If your debtor be in straits, grant him a delay until he can discharge his debt. But if you waive the sum as alms, it will be better for you, if you but knew it." This verse is also in continuation to the earlier verses of the Quran, focusing on personal loan transactions. It categorically stipulates that debtor is entitled to a concessional delay in loan repayment if he is in a dire strait and cannot repay the loan as per agreement. God rather suggests a more worthy act to the believers, that as creditors, if you waive off a private loan to a needy person as alms or charity, it is the best act. This is indeed a noble act because the creditor has compensated the debtor on account of later's precarious circumstances, hoping God may forgive him and shower his blessings when he is in straits in this world and on the judgment day. One related wisdom from this verse is that if a creditor has to advance loan to a needy person, he may give only that much amount as a loan that he can later relinquish without disturbing expenditure on his own necessities of life. In real life, what normally happens is that in personal loan transactions, people show excessive generosity on the belief that their loan amount will definitely be returned at the agreed time by the needy debtor. However, in many instances, this may not happen, and then there is animosity and deep hatred between both the parties, leading to even breakup of relationship. Islam is a practical religion, and it expects prudent behavior from all believers in their day-to-day lives, so that they may avoid commission of every sin under all circumstances. For the guidance of mankind, Quran also quotes instances of earlier generations who used to practice riba so that mankind may take heed. Chapter 4, verse 161 of the Quran reads, "Because they Jews practice riba, although they were forbidden it, and cheat others of their possessions, we have prepared a stern chastisement for those of them that disbelieve." This verse is meant to highlight the fact that since some of the Jews used to practice riba in money lending business against God's will, and they also deprived other people of their possessions through cheating and misrepresentation, therefore they are bound to be destined for hell. This verse proves that riba is a means of cheating to deprive others of their wealth and possessions. In fact, all forms of riba, as explained earlier, have an element of cheating in them. It leads to concentration of wealth in few hands, and ultimately the socio-economic and political system collapses, leading to bloodshed and anarchy. Since Islam is a religion of peace, it cannot allow a social system that is contrary to the principles of equity and fair dealing to exist under any circumstances. This verse is in fact a warning to all nations and people of all faith that if God can condemn Jews who had maximum profits in their community and who were thought to be the chosen one nation, Muslims and other nations will also meet the same fate if they practice riba in any form. In the light of quoted verses of the Quran, it becomes evident that those who practice riba are greedy and selfish persons, and they exhibit certain traits that are condemnable under morality and ethics. Such persons are usually self-centered and stingy, who try to justify accumulation of wealth on different pretexts. One important consideration is wealth accumulation for their progeny. However, this act may become a cause of pushing their progeny into the hellfire if the progeny also amass wealth without distributing a fair portion of it for the cause of God. So the traits of a person who practices riba may be summed up in the following words. 1. Greed for accumulation of wealth and riches for self and the progeny. 2. Extravaganza in personal life for ostentatious purposes. 3. Indifferent attitude towards plight of the fellow beings, especially the poor and the needy, a behavior exhibited by a typical Scrooge. 4. A lukewarm or snobbish attitude towards amelioration of the destitute segments of the society. Finally, preference of wealth over God's love. I conclude the second segment of my monologue on the complex subject of riba with a prayer that Allah Almighty may bless this effort. Please do subscribe and share my channel for updates. It's absolutely free.